Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. It's episode 2665 of The Tom Woods Show. And I have with me Will Boydum. And I would normally tell you all about him and give you his background, but what we're going to be talking about today, actually, and how he says he's typically known, is about his son, and that he's the father of his son, Robert. And you probably can guess from the title of the episode where we're going with this. When Will wrote me a note about his situation, he's a member of my School of Life program, and he'd been in one of the small groups, and it was suggested that maybe he ought to consider proposing a podcast episode to me. And when I heard about what happened, I thought, this is an absolute definite, for quite a few reasons. But as you know from I don't know what I'm actually going to title the episode as I'm recording it right now, but Will's son Robert drowned, and we're going to talk about what was done in the wake of that, because Robert's still with us, and there are a lot of levels at which we can talk about this. We can talk about the medical establishment, different kinds of treatments. We might also remind people about how it's not uncommon in terms of the rankings of what is it the most common cause of death in children of a certain age?
Most common cause of death in children under 4.
Yeah. So, there aren't that many deaths of children under 4, but the most common is this, and it can be absolutely heartbreaking. And I know Mike Cernovich on Twitter every year reminds people not to disregard that. So, Will, I want to talk about what happened with Robert and what you guys did and how he's doing and all this, because I guess I wouldn't have known any of this if you hadn't written me. I wouldn't have known any of this. But can we just start with the circumstances, how long ago this was, and what actually happened, first of all?
Sure. So February 28th of 2018 was the date of his drowning. Large number of people were at the house. I was actually out of town for work, but there was a large number of people at the house. My grandmother-in-law thought that one of my sons had possession of Robert. Was actually taking him to go get a shower. When they all gathered for lunch, she said, "Where's Robert?" He said, "I don't have him. I thought you had him." Anyway, the search ensued. He was found in a pond on our property. This will be much later in the story, but he apparently jumped in the pond because his boot fell off and he went in after it, something he told us after his recovery. My daughter pulled him out of the pond, began CPR. The police came, the ambulance came. They did CPR for about 45 minutes, got a heartbeat, loaded him in the ambulance, took off for the hospital, lost the heartbeat. So looking at the ambulance times and what we know from the times at the hospital, he was without a heartbeat or breathing for about an hour. CPR was done during most of that time. Once we got him into the hospital, into the intensive care unit, it was pretty obvious from the beginning that he was staged for organ harvesting. They were not doing any sort of intervention. They weren't doing anything to protect his brain. They weren't doing anything to control the swelling. They had written him off. And we were told a number of times we should just medicate him and let him pass, that everything that was Robert is gone. At one point, we had 5 doctors in the room, kind of arm twisting that we should let him go. At the point that we told him that his organs would go on the ground with him, things changed quickly. All of a sudden, we were talking about options. Unfortunately, they didn't have much to offer in the way of options. It was drugs to control neurological storming, which is what happens with a brain injury. The brain begins to send out noise. The body becomes highly toned. I'll send you a picture of Robert, but he was bent backwards. His head was nearly touching his bottom. And he was that way for 27 days.
Oh, my goodness.
When we refused to abandon him, the hospital basically abandoned him. He was removed from an isolation room with quiet and stillness and put out in the hall, which is when his back went into that C shape. I'm an injured diver. I know of case studies where hyperbaric was used to treat drowned children. And so we begged morning and evening rounds, can we put him in the chamber?
So you had this pre-existing knowledge that this could be, okay. I'm quite sure the vast majority of parents would never have thought of that.
So we kept pushing for hyperbaric intervention. We were refused. So eventually what became clear is we had to get out of the hospital. And we did. On day 37, transported Robert to New Orleans to a small hyperbaric clinic there, which is staffed by Dr. Paul Harch, who was a professor, instructor at LSU School of Medicine in what they call the Department of Hyperbaric and Emergency Medicine. So Robert was placed in the chamber 2 days later. We arrived on a Friday evening and ended up going in the chamber on a Monday morning. 2 days later, that bent back was straight. 3 days later, he was responding to us. At the end of the week, he was laughing at his brothers on a FaceTime call. Still had a profound brain injury, was probably blind at that time. We learned later from cortical visual impairment, all things that hyperbaric helps treat. The biggest thing was getting him off of the drugs, because all the drugs that were used in the hospital are used off-label. They're all toxic. None of them have been tested on pediatrics or tested in the combinations that they're used in. And they're basically just trying to mask that toning that occurs. Hyperbaric heals the brain and stops the toning. So we stayed in New Orleans for 40 dives for about 2 months. Came home with a little boy who was responsive and awake. And again, I'll send you a picture of how we left New Orleans. Fast forward 7 years. Robert's walking, talking, running, jumping. He's trying to learn how to read. Still have some visual issues. Still have a little bit of palsy in his fingers. Fine motor things are a bit difficult for him. But the big issue there is that we had to wait 41 days to get hyperbaric intervention when we could have had it as early as day 6. And that's it. Early intervention is what's important with any sort of brain injury. We're talking about drowning, but the injury that Robert has is called reperfusion. So when the heart stops, when the heart starts again and the blood comes back, you get massive inflammation, which in the case of a brain, which is in a closed container, you get high pressures and brain damage. But with a stroke and with a heart attack, you also get reperfusion injury. So everything that we're talking about could be used for stroke and heart attack as well. It can be used for stabilization. There were pigs that were drained of all their blood, refilled with saline, put in the hyperbaric chamber, and they lived because the saline could carry enough oxygen. This could be used on the battlefield. It could be used with severe trauma. There is a hyperbaric ambulance that's being brought to market to help with early intervention and severe injury. Anyway, that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Can you explain what, before we get into more about the case of your son, what hyperbaric treatment consists of? Like what's actually going on when you're having it?
And until a couple of years ago, we would have called it hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because the patient's placed inside of a pressure vessel in pure oxygen, and the pressure is raised to help drive the oxygen into the person. And then in addition to what the red blood cells can carry, you actually drive oxygen into the plasma like a soda pop. When you pop the lid, all the CO2 comes out. Well, you're actually driving oxygen into the plasma so that the blood's carrying more oxygen than it can carry under normal conditions. Getting it into more places, it causes regeneration of blood vessels, causes epigenetic effects. Inflammation genes flip off, healing genes flip on. It causes stem cells to motivate. Robert was not treated with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. He was treated with what's called hyperbaric therapy. So that was done with just room air under pressure. Has all the same effects without some of the toxicity issues that occurs with pure oxygen.
Is there, I've heard here and there, it's suggested that like being in a hyperbaric chamber can contribute to overall, even if they have no pre-existing condition, it can contribute to overall health. It can contribute to longevity. Do you know anything about that?
We all have pre-existing conditions. So yes, there are a lot of the professional athletes that use them for performance enhancement, for injury recovery. I dive with Robert. My wife dives with Robert. So it should be helping stave off Alzheimer's. There are longevity claims. I won't I won't assert those claims, but there are longevity claims that it helps lengthen the telomeres again, and the mitochondria.
So let's go to when you're at the hospital. Were you trying to explain to the medical professionals there that this particular approach would be potentially promising and they should pursue it? What kind of feedback did you get? What did they say?
We don't know anything about it.
Oh, that was the answer?
Yeah. One doctor was honest enough to say that we're aware of Dr. Harch and the work that he does in New Orleans, but we can't replicate it. And I don't understand that, because Dr. Harch publishes everything he does. The problem is that so much of hyperbaric therapy in this country is wound care related to like diabetic leg wounds or crush injuries or things like that. It's done at very, very high pressures with toxicity issues that accompany it. And when you're treating the brain and when you're treating a small child, it's like any other drug that it's dose critical. You wouldn't give a child an adult dose of a medicine. You don't give a child an adult dose of hyperbaric. And so when they did try to recreate it, they did it at pressures that were much too high and oxygen concentrations of much too high. There's a lot of speculation that the drug companies were involved and didn't really want it to work. It's a 360-some-year-old therapy. It's not patentable. Nobody's going to get rich off of it. So
you're suggesting it's suppressed for that reason?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've had one doctor notable in the drowning community tell me that he would not advance it because he couldn't patent it and couldn't make any money off of it.
Hey, gang, I have a friend whose IQ I would estimate as being somewhere in the neighborhood of about 751, and he's the kind of guy you want in your corner. I'm talking, of course, about the great Matthew Sercely, a tax attorney who helps liberty-minded folks just like you keep more of your money and stay out of trouble with the IRS. This guy has the same philosophy you do, so he wants to keep every dollar he can out of the hands of the IRS, and he'll use every one of his 751 IQ points to save you every last dollar possible. By the way, yes, I said attorney, not CPA, and that means your conversations with him are protected by attorney-client privilege. That's a very big deal. You can't get that kind of protection from your accountant. And Matt is one of us. He's been on the Tom Woods cruise. He's been at my murder mystery parties. He's listened to the Tom Woods show since the very beginning. He's a real OG. He doesn't just do taxes. He builds strategies to legally starve the state. Entity structuring, income shifting, advanced planning. This is war by spreadsheet. If you're running a business or even thinking about one, you need someone like Matthew in your corner. He knows how to legally reduce your tax burden, structure your business the right way, and avoid trouble while keeping every dollar you're entitled to. Go to agoristtaxadvice.com/woods. That's AGORIST taxadvice.com/woods and grab your free Agorist Tax Toolkit. It's full of powerful tools and templates you can use to get your business in order, track your expenses, and reduce how much the IRS takes from you without crossing any lines. Again, that's agoristtaxadvice.com/woods. Take the first step to keeping what's yours. So if I am at a major hospital, let's say in a major U.S. city, is there any chance that would be a form of treatment offered to me if really all else failed? Or do I have to go to New Orleans?
You pretty much have to go to New Orleans, or you have to get
incredible.
Get out of the hospital and go to a private center. The chambers are there. They're in the major hospitals, again, because of crush injury, diabetic leg wounds, gas gangrene, embolisms. There are 15 or 16 now approved diagnoses in the United States that hyperbaric is approved for, none of which are overtly brain injuries. So when you ask them to use it off-label, just like they use drugs off-label, just like they use other things off-label to treat a brain injury condition, they won't do it.
You said something earlier that I jotted down to come back to about when it was discovered that his organs were going to be buried with him. Suddenly we had options. I'm going to need you to unpack that if you don't mind.
So when kids come into, or when anybody comes into the emergency room, there's apparently a matrix that is filled out, Glasgow Coma score, other things, and it's determined very quickly how many resources are going to be expended on that person, whether they're going to be expensive with low chance of success or have a high chance of success. My understanding is that Robert did not survive the matrix. he was just almost immediately marked for organ donation. And so when he went upstairs, there was nothing done to control the swelling. He was actually warmed, where I think you've heard that brain entries should be cooled to help control the swelling. He was warmed. And when another parent asked with their child later on, why are you warming my child? They said, well, we have to protect the organs. I mean, they were pretty open about it.
Wait a minute. So you're suggesting that the staff there was thinking of your child as simply a body from which they could harvest organs? Is that what you're suggesting?
It's the only conclusion we've been able to draw after 4 years. I drew that conclusion about 4 years afterwards, after working with a number of other parents and seeing how these drowned kids are handled. They're never given any hope. They're always encouraged to donate the organs and terminate life.
I don't know what to say here. I honestly don't know what to say. Say something about your website, because I think that's an important thing for people to see.
When Robert ended up in the hospital, there was another little girl named Eden Carlson. You could find her story on YouTube. And she was a case study in a book that I had been given prior to Robert's accident. So that's how I knew about drowning being used for, or HBOT being used for drowning. So we reached out, and Eden's mom, Crystal Carlson, spent a lot of time with my wife, talking her through things, making recommendations, encouraging us to, not to abandon Robert. And so subsequent to that, with Robert's success, parents reach out to us all the time. And my wife was spending 40 plus hours a week on the phone with the parents of drowned children all over the world. And it was wearing her out, wearing me out, wearing out our home life. Robert wasn't getting his therapy done. So I took everything that we were telling these parents, and it was repetitive. With every parent, you would explain the same things over and over again. And I basically put them on a website called drownedbabyorg. And it's just by topic. And so when a parent calls and says, hey, what do you do about this? You send them a link to the page and say, hey, read that. If you have any questions, call me back. So everything that we've done with Robert is memorialized there.
Okay. Drownedbaby.org. And so, right. So people, so it's not just in the abstract. It also talks about exactly what went on with Robert.
Right. And all the pictures before, after, links to his Facebook page, links to some of his therapy, basically trying to take us out of the middle.
Right. Understood. So, when we were corresponding about having a conversation about this, you had a long list of areas that this particular issue touches on, because we've already talked about the organ donation issue, the hyperbaric issue, the way the medical establishment treats that or does not. But you also mentioned the fact that drugs do not heal and only mask symptoms. But how's that related to Robert's case?
And this is where you look at it. If you look at that first picture where he's bent backwards, his head's touching his rear, that's neurological storming. His brain is damaged, is sending out noise. He's bent backwards like that. His muscles are bar hard. At night, when we would lay in the room with him, you would hear his joints creak. He would groan. His heart rate was over 200 at times. His blood pressure was through the roof. His body was just in severe stress. And so they used a number of drugs, a number of drug combinations. It's almost always the same drugs they give to every drowned kid to try to control that. In Robert's case and in most other cases, it doesn't work. They're just trying to mask the symptoms, but they're all of those drugs are cerebral disruptors. They try to block some channel in the brain to get the body to stop doing what it's doing. And when you've got a severely injured brain that's trying to heal and you're disrupting it, my theory is that it's not healing anymore. It's at best in suspended animation, but some of the drugs are highly toxic. And when they're given long-term and in high doses, there are other effects.
Is there an organization called Life Gift? Can you tell us about it? At least what your experience was?
So they're the guys that came in the room a couple times every day early on in the hospital stay, basically telling us how great it would be if Robert would donate his organs and how many lives he could save. And they would give him a life walk if we chose to do that. And they would buy a cake. And we actually witnessed one of these from another child on the floor. And it was it was disgusting. I mean, they're parading this comatose child down the hallway, making a big deal out of the fact that he's going downstairs to be parted out. They buy some cheap cake from Kroger and try to make the parents feel better about what's happening. But it was disgusting. And to watch parents abandon children in a couple of days that are, one of the kids was 14 years old. If you get the flu, we give somebody a week to get over it. If you break a bone, we give you a couple of months to get over it. But a hard hit like a drowning, and they want to make life and death decisions in the first 2 or 3 days, and it's too soon.
Talk about inflammation, because this is at the heart of what what the harm that's done to the person in the situation. So, what would be the ideal response to the kind of inflammation that Robert was experiencing?
Anything that reduces inflammation. So if I kicked you in the shin as hard as I could, you would get a big knot on your shin. And you would immediately maybe take a Tylenol, take an aspirin, you would put an ice pack on it. You might even go to the doctor and he would give you a prescription drug to try to reduce that inflammation. So with the brain, the aggravating part there is the brain's in a closed container. So when it swells, it not only has the inflammation to deal with, but it's being crushed, basically. And you'll see people in car accidents, skiing accidents will often have holes drilled in their skull to relieve that pressure. Nothing is done for these drowned kids to relieve that pressure. For the first 3 days, it's almost consistent. No matter what hospital they're in, the doctors go, well, we just have to wait and see. The swelling peaks at day 3, typically about 72 hours, and then it'll start to go down. And we're seeing now the hospitals pushing for life or death decisions in the first couple of days. They haven't even reached peak swelling and begin to come down. They have no idea what condition that child's in.
There's when I was looking at your website earlier before we started talking, I was drawn to the post about the kitchen sink because the question comes up: what therapy or treatment made the biggest difference for Robert? Well, I mean, obviously we've been talking about hyperbaric, but was there anything else? Was there anything involving diet or anything else that you did that maybe you can't prove that it made a difference, but that maybe you would recommend to other people? I mean, was it just the hyperbaric, or was there other things? Were there other things you did?
There were things we could do in the hospital, and I've got on the website at the top menu, there's a little quick start guide, and that just kind of walks parents through, hey, these are the things to do in order very quickly. The hospital's probably going to put the child on some sort of Pediasure type, milk solids, corn syrup, just junk. It's not proper food. The body can't heal without proper food. When we asked for something different, the hospital told us there was nothing else. So my wife called the midwife, and she showed up at the hospital with 400 ounces of breast milk that was collected from our community. The hospital refused to allow us to feed that to Robert, but immediately they found another formula, whole food, vegetarian formula, all organic, called Nourish. So there are a number of formulas that are available that are whole food type, proper food. We started him on high dose fish oil immediately because that has anti-inflammatory properties. It also has DHA, and which the building blocks of the brain. So it's a good supplement for that. High dose vitamin C, high dose vitamin E. Again, all that help with inflammation and swelling. We did convince the hospital to let us attempt something called normobaric therapy, which is where you increase the oxygen and then take it away for about 45 minutes twice a day. Eden had incredible results with that. Robert, not so much, but it was something we could do constructively.
Did you have, before all this happened? Well, let me ask this. You might have had opinions about the American medical system before all this. Were they changed or intensified by the experience you had?
Intensified. So,
yeah. What's like if we were just to make this into an episode about what happened to Robert illustrates in microcosm the major problems with American medicine, how would you do that?
The biggest thing is that medicine is not protocol driven, and the protocols in many cases are no good, but we just keep doing them over and over and over again.
Well, does that include, for example, saying that hyperbaric treatment is, quote, off-label for brain injury?
Yes, it is. It's off-label for brain injury, but the contradiction there is that every drug they used on Robert was off-label for the purpose it was used for.
Okay.
So there's an inconsistency there. Drugs seem to get a pass, and anything else doesn't.
Now you seem like a very easygoing guy, but were there any scenes at the hospital trying to reason with the medical staff?
I warn parents that doctors don't have a sense of humor, and there are security departments in hospitals for a reason.
Yeah.
We are aware of parents that have been escorted out of the room, and that was it. They were kicked off the hospital property, and they could not advocate for their child. So we were very careful about how we tried to always couch everything in the form of a question, so it wasn't confrontational. Hey, why can't we try this? Hey, can we try this? Hey, would you read this paper and tell me what you think? Hey, trying to keep it non-confrontational. Some of it became a joke because 7 a.m., 7 p.m. rounds, I always said, hey, can we take him downstairs and put him in the chamber now? And I became such a broken record, it became kind of like the daily joke. But we were able to get the fish oil in because of that. Hey, well, how will this hurt him if we do it? And they couldn't articulate that it would hurt him, so they consented and let us do it. Same with the normobaric. Well, can you tell me how this would hurt him? Well, I can't really. I think it'll be okay. Yeah, sure, you can do it if it makes you feel better.
Hey, everybody, you've heard me talk about Crowd Health, which I use for my family instead of some insane health insurance policy that just gets more and more expensive every year. Well, now Crowd Health has its new Black Swan membership. It's the healthcare alternative for people who want autonomy over their care, their costs, and their lifestyle. So you're ready for those rare but potentially devastating black swan events in life. Now, look, nobody's really thrilled with their health insurance. And of course, everybody wonders, if something really devastating happened, how much would I be covered anyway? Well, Crowd Health, the health insurance alternative, is offering this Black Swan membership now. So we're talking about healthcare for under $100. That includes a team of health bill negotiators, low-cost prescription and lab testing tools, as well as a database of low-cost, high-quality doctors vetted by Crowd Health. And if something major should happen, you pay the first $15K, then the Crowd steps in to help fund the rest. And of course, you'll join the Crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Black Swan moments might be rare, but good health insurance alternatives shouldn't be. Get started today for as low as just $80 per month for your first 3 months by going to joincrowdhealth.com and using code WOODS. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code WOODS. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Joincrowdhealth.com, code WOODS. Well, one thing is obvious. After this happened to Robert, you didn't just go home and figure, well, we'll just try to nurse him back to health and that'll be the end of it. You became very active in this area. That is to say, you started the website, trying to convey information to people who were might be in similar situations. But you also, I guess, were in contact with a congressman with regard to so-called right to try laws.
Right. So when we got home, our experience was such that we really want to change how we deal with drowning in this country. We want to give these kids a chance. So we started just casting about for ways to make that change. And one of the things I heard about was right to try laws. And I was like, man, I really wish they had given me the right to try when I was at the hospital. One of our state congressmen, Tan Parker, brought right to try to Texas primarily for orthopedic stem cells. But I reached out to him, and the unfortunate issue with right to try is that if the hospital grants you the right to try, it protects the hospital. But you can't use that to force the hospital to do something. So I don't know how we change them. I don't know how we strengthen those laws. We can shield vaccine makers from damage. Why can't we shield a hospital from doing what a parent asks you to do?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
Especially when you told me that the best thing for my child is to euthanize him and let him go, then, let's try some things. Why not?
Let's try something. Absolutely. And it sounds like they couldn't really come up with a good answer to you as to what harm would be done to the child by trying anyway.
Right.
Because they barely know what they're talking about.
Hyperbaric has a very, very low risk profile. The most common injury, in air quotes, if you call it that, with hyperbaric is something called barotrauma. And it's very scary, and they say it in a deep voice. But in layman's terms, it's called earache. The same earache you get when the plane descends or takes off kind of thing. Your eustachian tubes don't clear. So
what kind of general, I don't know, do you have any general advice for parents? I mean, it's highly unlikely that very many parents are going to be in this exact situation, but you don't have to be in this exact situation to be facing, let's say, if not hostile people, then extremely unsympathetic people, that's for sure, in the medical world.
I mean, rule number one is never give up. The other thing is don't ever leave your child alone in the hospital. So the day my wife was in the hospital for 37 days straight, she never left. I left once to go to a presentation that my other children were doing. So I showed up for 2 hours and then I went back to the hospital. The last time that they made a hard push for us to euthanize Robert, the day that they pulled him out of isolation and put him in the hall, the day that his back went into that super spasm, we would go for a walk every night around the block. Leave the hospital about 5 o'clock, go for a walk around the block a couple times just to get some fresh air and get out. And we had not made it halfway around the block when the nurse called in tears. And she said, I don't know why they're doing this, but you have to come back right now. And by the time we got back to Robert's room, they had stripped everything off the walls and were pushing him out into the hall. Basically, if we weren't going to let him go, they were going to send him on his way kind of thing, I think. And we were told, well, that room was needed for somebody that was in far more critical shape. And so he would have to be put in the hallway. And within hours, he had assumed that backward C shape from the food carts crashing and nurses yelling up and down the hall and all the other, when you have a brain injury, silence, darkness, those things are important to not antagonize the injury. And, so in Robert's case, that's when we bent backwards.
Oh my gosh. This would be a good documentary, honestly, a short one. A talented do.
I keep being told to write a book or make a movie, but it's kind of stepping back to the website and to changing the way that we treat drowning in this country. A little boy named Hanzik in the Czech Republic drowned, and his aunt lives in California. She found Robert's story. She called us. She said, basically, my brother's being told that we're going to send you home with your son and some medicine, and he's probably going to die. What did you do with Robert? Will you tell me? So we gave them all the protocols, everything that we had done with Robert. They sent that to her brother in the Czech Republic. Her brother took it to the doctor, and the doctor said the Czech version of, hey, why not? We know what the outcome's going to be if we don't. And they did that. And 4 days later, Hanzik was up doing therapy. He had begun to bend backwards just like Robert. And we've met the family a number of times now when they come to the state to visit relatives. Hanzik is standing, he's walking. Great. It's just another wonderful success story, and changed the way that they deal with drowning in the Czech Republic. The doctor actually came back and apologized to the parents and said, when you brought this to me, I was just humoring you. I thought this was not going to work. And he said, I'm floored by how well it worked. Morocco, we had a child in Morocco with a similar experience. So we're changing medicine everywhere, but in the freest country on earth. So
yeah. But I don't know. The more I read about, well, I'll put it this way. It seems to me like even though it's not nearly enough, there's still a lot more people now who are skeptical of the medical establishment than certainly there have ever been in my lifetime. And it seems to me you get to a critical mass, something's going to happen. I don't know when that is or what that is, but something's going to happen.
Yeah, you should write a book. Oh, wait, you did. Never mind.
Jeez, I'm so exhausted from writing books. I'm telling you, can't even think about it. But your website has what people need, and people should look at it. So it's drownedbaby.org, and it's got quite a few posts about all different topics related to this, and then also the story of Robert, in particular, the first 24 hours and all that. Very, very much worth looking at. So I would urge people to do that. Is there anything I've overlooked in this story that you want to make sure we cover?
I'm sure I'll think of 10 things when we hang up, but people know how to get a hold of me. My email's on the website. I just encourage people to spread it. It's not if you'll meet somebody with a drowned child, it's when, because it is very prevalent. Texas and Florida lead the nation in drownings because of our long warm seasons and our ubiquitous water. So
right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody, the website drownedbaby.org. Check that out. Will, thank you very much for your time and
yes,
what you had to say. We appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good evening.
And everybody, I just want to remind you, remember, we're going to be honoring Ron Paul at his 90th birthday party, and I hope you can be there. It will be indoors. You don't have to worry about weathering the Texas heat on August 9th. But we will be having a wonderful time indoors with a great many people you will have heard of from the old Ron Paul Revolution days. So I hope you'll consider joining us there at ronpaulbbq.com. And thanks very much, everybody. See you next time.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.